All right. How to reinvent yourself, how to become a brand new you, how to change. All right. We're going to talk about this process because it's something I wrote a book about. Plug, by the way, if you haven't gotten this yet, You 2.0 is the name of my book. It's really beneficial and it'll help you out. So if you haven't already, read that and allow me to shill for a little bit longer here and just ask you if you're getting any value from this, or if you're about to get some value, just hit the subscribe button. I'm starting something brand new from scratch. I'm helping a lot of you guys start brand new life paths from scratch. So I know you'd want that support on your new journey. So I'm guilt tripping you into subscribing to my channel right now. Okay. Anyways, back to the topic. Tackling some of these bigger issues that we all deal with. Confidence, getting started. Now we're going to talk about reinventing yourself. Everybody wants to change. Everybody has this vision of themselves where they're totally reinvented, right? You're self-actualized, you're in the career you want, you have the relationships you want, you're in perfect shape. But when it comes to the actual changing part, to the actual transformation, change is very difficult. And for most people, change is improbable. The vast majority of people stay stuck in their ruts and they stay stuck in their patterns and they don't reinvent themselves. And why is that? Well, one of the words that I mentioned there is the key to everything. Patterns. Okay? Human beings we're pattern recognition animals. We run on scripts. We run on narratives and belief systems that guide us. And I think people know this. I think people know that they have belief systems that guide the way they behave, but I don't think they realize how deep it is. I don't think you realize how deep it is. To become a new person, it's not so much that you are trying to become somebody else, right? So we look at the reinvention process as trying to become this brand new us, when in reality, we're not trying to become a brand new person. You're not trying to become a brand new person. You're trying to become the person who you were supposed to be in the first place. You are going to become the person you should have been in the first place. There's this quote from Michelangelo, and it talks about him creating the statue of David. And they're like, how did you create the statue of David? And he said, I removed everything that wasn't David. How profound is that? The idea of there being a concrete slab and an artist thinking about creating a masterpiece, not by addition, but by removing everything that's not essential, right? So you have a lot of beliefs and narratives and scripts that run so deeply that you're unaware of them, or you just pay lip service to them. And until you unearth them, it's going to be hard for you to change, right? Because what happens when you try to change? You have this feeling that there's some sort of blind spot. You don't know why you can't make the transition. Like your own personality or, deep self kind of eludes you. And one of the things that can help you unearth that is to actually think about them, actually write them down, actually meditate on where you are now. What belief systems got you to be to the place that you are right now? We can take a look at the normal example that I pull up. A lot of other self-writers pull up in their writing. But, you're working at a job you don't like, or you are shackled in the office cubicle. What led you to there? What belief systems are so deeply embedded in you that the only inevitable endpoint of that was for you to be working, as a mid-level manager or something like that? Well, you have a ton of scripts and narratives that lend to that. The script of safety and certainty. It's been pounded into your head since you were in kindergarten that anything outside of the path where you go to school and get that safe job not only isn't ideal, but it's actually dangerous, right? Even though in reality, or at least my reality in a different perspective, there are a lot of things that you can do outside of that normal path that carry little to no risk. Businesses you can start for a low amount of money, ventures you can learn about for free, watching YouTube, different things like that. So that's a deep script that people have, that getting an education and working at a stable job is the only way to safety. When in reality, that's actually a path to ruin for a lot of people. Ask people who were mid-level managers at IBM and their entire department got swept up. Putting all your eggs in the basket of employment is a great way to set yourself up for heartache if your industry gets wiped out or the economy collapses or something like that. But back to the scripts themselves. There are scripts about how you're supposed to behave. You are told to not bend the rules. We have this deep-seated narrative in us that was ingrained to us since we were little kids. Sit still. Don't touch that. Behave. Sit at your desk. Don't get up. Ask to use the bathroom. We learn to become rule followers, as if these arbitrary rules have any merit or weight, as if they're not completely imaginary. So you are indoctrinated into becoming a rule follower. That's another script that people have. Different scripts that people have include things like what is important when it comes to status. There's people like me who, when I'm asked about what I do, I just say, I'm a writer. I don't go into the depths about online business and entrepreneurship because people don't really understand it. But go tell somebody you're an engineer, a lawyer, a doctor. You might be miserable, but you're going to have that status. And it's very funny how we have, a mass of people who aren't really satisfied with their lives. I'm not saying that everyone is. I'm not saying that everybody that works in the office is, a corporate slave or, cubicle sheep. Like, I don't think that way. But I know that there are a lot of people who live unfulfilled lives and then pass on that script to future generations. And a lot of it comes from your upbringing. Like the parents you have who you basically have by chance. You could have had a ton of different parents with a ton of different beliefs that could have guided you to think and behave a totally different way. With my child, I have a 3-year-old right now, and guaranteed, I'm not going to push her into any path. She's going to have an example of a father who is a free and autonomous individual, and I'm going to allow her to be the same way. So I'll look and I'll see if she has interest in a certain direction. If I notice that she really has a penchant for something, I'll nudge her in that direction. But I'm never going to tell her that she has to do anything, right? And then a lot of those scripts in our head are about things that we feel we should do, things that we feel like we have to do. There's kind of this playbook of what it's, the societal playbook for what a good person is. You know what it all boils down to, mostly, these scripts? Social rejection. You have these scripts and you abide by them because you're deathly afraid of social rejection. It's super deeply embedded into us. Like social aspects of life kind of hit the nerve hardest for all of us. And that's because we're animals. It's a great thing to look at human beings as animals, as an evolved species, to take it into that lower state, to really look at what's going on. So, simple anecdote, I'm not an evolutionary psychologist, but back in the day, if nobody liked you and they left you and the tribe went on without you, you get eaten by a tiger or die in the cold or whatever, right? So we have this deep embedded fear of social rejection, which is why people stick to these scripts. And what you're going to have to do is really get a full understanding of the scripts that run your life. So I just posed the cliche examples. that a lot of people talk about, but what you should do is really take out a pen and paper, write down some of these hidden beliefs and scripts that you have, and really elaborate on them. Where do they come from? Do they come from your parents? Do they come from your local community? Do they come from your religion? Do they come from the media? Where are you getting this information, these scripts? And the funny thing about it is, people cling to these identities like so firmly, identities that they didn't even choose, identities that were assigned to them, right? And so the whole thing about reinventing yourself is changing your narratives. Human beings, we think in narratives, we think in stories. So you have to change the stories that you're telling yourself in order to get where you want to go. So step one is seeing those scripts that are running your life and not just paying lip service to them, not just being like, oh, yes, I know I play by society's rules. Like, no, what rules? It could be specific things as you grew up in a family of doctors and the only path to success, the only path to status was being a doctor. Or you had a parent who taught you that as a woman, you're supposed to be demure and not go for things like STEM or leadership. Really get down into those scripts that guide your life. They come from everywhere, and they're a lot more subtle and nuanced than the ones that come to mind first. So that's why that exercise is helpful, because you really drill down into it. We're often strangers to ourselves. Like, we have an idea, but that's the thing about writing things down, is it actually forces you to think and articulate the chatter that's going on in your mind. So that stuff is useless as chatter, but when you let it out, when you flush it out and articulate it and do these kind of exercises. So first, you can talk about the scripts. Second, you can do something called the why 5 times strategy. And the why 5 times strategy is where you talk about the scripts and then you talk about why you believe them, right? And then you do it again and again, like a little kid who asked too many questions. So like for me, I had the beginning of my 20s, I was a fuck up. I was a loser. I did nothing but drink, smoke, chase girls, ruin my education, squandered away all my opportunities because I was running on certain scripts. I was running on a script of social validation that, as a young person, especially where I grew up, you were looked up to the most if you partied the hardest, if you slept with the most women, if you were the toughest, if you can win the most fights, and that was the script that I had running in my head. And then I looked at where it got me. It got me to a bunch of relationships where I hurt people, legal trouble, depression, and all those things that I had to prove to get me that status put me in a place where I didn't want to be. So I had to change those stories. And to make that transition into changing those stories, you don't want to think about yourself as I'm changing, right? You want to think of yourself as literally killing the old you so that you can become the real you. That's a chapter in my book. You have to kill the old you. You can't leave a remnant of the old you if you want to change. And that might mean cutting certain people out of your life, situations out of your life, really starting from scratch. I put the analogy of the phoenix to start my book. So a phoenix is this mythical creature that, burns itself into a pile of ashes and then it rises from the ashes again. That's usually what it takes. You have to rise from the ashes in order to reinvent yourself. And it's no coincidence that people who go through tragedy often reinvent themselves. People who go through heartbreak or who everything around them falls apart. It's that idea that sometimes you have to lose everything first before you gain the life that you were supposed to have. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, but if life does force your hand, you should use it. But what happens is life usually doesn't force people's hand enough for them to change. So they just kind of plod along, and, it's monotonous. It's that Chinese water torture Groundhog Day experience where, you're not depressed. You're not even unhappy. You're fine, but you're just fine. And there's that gap between fine and where you want to be. And then it's in the back of your mind a little bit each day, not enough to make it super painful, but that little piece each day chips away at you, chips away at you, chips away at you. And people try to pretend it's not true. I see people all the time. I go to speech clubs, Toastmasters clubs, and the Mayo Clinic is a big hospital in the town I live in. And I'm in these clubs with a lot of people who work for that company. And, a lot of them would be considered your corporate, golden handcuff type. And there are some of them who genuinely like their jobs. Again, I'm not making a generalization about everyone, but I can see it in people's faces where things are getting chipped off. You can see that life is chipping away at them a little bit. They're too calm, structured, and passive. Like, you can see it. You've been around people like this. You're probably one of these people, these calm, structured, and passive people who are kind of like, it's almost like they're staying so calm because if they really look at what's going on, the realization that they've wasted their life, like, they'll just explode. So they have this very calm voice. Jan in Human Resources. Oh, yes. Are you coming to the luncheon next weekend? That type of shit. Because it's hard to face the fact that you've wasted your life and start all over. But sometimes that's what you have to do. Because otherwise, you're going to plod along and you're going to look back with regret. And I don't necessarily think that people who don't achieve their number one goal are just like sad and destitute when they die or anything like that. But people do have regrets. Without a doubt, people have regrets. Of course they do. And, human beings are excellent at rationalizing their situation. So when someone goes through their life and they didn't self-actualize, didn't do their bucket list, didn't live to their fullest potential, they have things that they can lean back on that are justifiable. They had a good career. That's good. You put food on the table for your family. That's honorable, very honorable. They have friends and family. They had fun experiences. They went on vacations. So like the life, I don't want to come across as saying the life of the average person is bad. I don't think that way. But I do think a lot of people leave a lot on the table and try to rationalize that away. So you don't have to, like, you guys know me by now. I'm not the make $1 million, move to Bali, have an Instagram lifestyle. No. But just don't bullshit yourself because it's your life. That's what I always tell people. Whatever you think about my message, like, it's your life. You are having that conversation with yourself alone. So you know the truth, even if you try to hide from it. So I don't have to coerce you. I just have to show you the choices. Stay the same or kill the old you and change. I've told the story in other videos. I literally, stood in my room and I was like, I'm not fucking doing this anymore. And that was the day I killed my old self. So that's the way to think about it, because in a way, you're going to have a grieving process when you kill your old self. Because regardless of how your situation is, it just doesn't feel good to lack an identity. In the short term, it doesn't feel good to like be completely aimless because you're starting over. But it could be necessary. Last thing I'll leave you with is another thing that ties into the idea of narratives, that humans live by narratives. There's something called the narrative fallacy, which I actually disagree with. The narrative fallacy is the idea that you shouldn't look at your life as a narration because life is fraught with chance and luck, happenstance, Some things just happen. There's not always a rhyme or reason to them. Everything doesn't happen for a reason. And from a purely logical standpoint, I would agree with it. But that's not the way human beings work. There's a writer named Nassim Taleb, and he talks about the fact that a lot of these, psychologists and stuff will use terms like the narrative fallacy, these other logical fallacies and things, but they don't account for the way that humans actually work. So, by the dictionary definition of them, they're true, but in the context of reality, they don't pass the sniff test. You have no choice but to look at your life as a narrative because you're a human being. Every human being, regardless of how nice or well-intentioned they are, for the most part is very self-interested and looks at themselves as the main character in the story. So if you're going to do that, you might as well be the hero. I love the idea of the hero's journey, the hero's arc, where you are the unassuming, lowly person. You're Harry Potter, orphan child with shitty aunts and uncles who don't like you. And then you have the moment, and then you go on the adventure. And then you go through obstacles and challenges, and then you come home with the prize victorious. I think it's good to think of yourself as the hero in the story because you're going to narrate your life anyways. You might as well do it in a positive way. And I've just developed the belief over time that people are heroic. I've seen so many examples of people who totally reinvented themselves and they just found courage. They killed their old selves and they just had that conversation that they needed to change. And it's no easy conversation and there's no guarantee you'll do it, but people do it and you see it and you could be one of those people. And I've gotten to a point in my writing where I'm not even saying it in a pandering way. Like, I think that you are very powerful and capable just by the fact that you're a human being. Like, humans are so resilient and adaptable. Like, it's crazy. Look at how we've grown as a species, the things we've invented, the problems we've solved, the trauma that we've recovered from and became stronger from. On the whole, humans have been getting better the whole time. And you should honor that legacy of people who have adapted and evolved. And take that same DNA, the DNA that went from hunter-gatherer to maker of computer that fits in your pocket. That's the same person, the same DNA, that same growth and building mechanism hasn't changed. A caveman essentially has the same brain as Steve Jobs. But we just developed more context, more resources. But that innate desire to build is there, so utilize it. And again, it's going to take you being immersed in, self-improvement for this to work. That's why a lot of my videos and a lot of my writing, frankly, overlaps quite a bit because they're basically a few simple concepts that you need to know. But, it's kind of like taking, 20 pieces of something. They're just 20 pieces, but the way you can arrange them creates a much bigger number with all the variables you could calculate, right? So there's a couple core principles that you need to learn and attach and overlap in different ways until you get it to work. And so you go on that hero's journey and you start to experiment. You start to adventure. You start to try things. Like I said in the Just Start video, you're not going to know beforehand what's going to work. And if you wait for everything to look like it's on the right path for the ducks to align, it's not going to happen. So you need to adopt the mindset that you're just running tests. There's no such thing as failure. Scientists don't get upset that the first experiment they run doesn't get them a Nobel Prize. No. What a scientist understands is that each time they run an experiment and it doesn't work, they're actually getting closer to the truth. because they've eliminated something that definitely doesn't work. So if you develop that mindset, an experimenter, then you give yourself freedom to test. So I'm rambling on a little bit by now, but the process is unlearning the scripts and patterns that led to you being where you are right now. Killing your old self, like really, instead of just changing, even if underlying it doesn't make a difference. Again, it's about narratives. You have to create the narrative that you are ditching the old you, killing them, burying them, burning them, setting them on fire, and tossing them into the bottom of the ocean, never to be seen again. Like, you need to take it that seriously. And then you become the hero. Go from ordinary to extraordinary, all the while testing and experimenting. 5 years ago, I had less than $50 to my name. I had rats living in the walls of my apartment. I had ruined my life, isolated myself socially, worked a dead-end job, had no prospects for the future, felt a level of depression I've never felt before in my life. And now, I write for a full-time living. I found my passion and purpose. I connect with smart and interesting people every day. Last night, I couldn't go to sleep, not because I was stressed out, but because I was too excited. Like, my gears were going too fast because there were so many new things I wanted to try. I reinvented myself, and so can you. All right, if you didn't already, like the video, comment, subscribe to the channel. Please, I'm trying to get this thing started, and I'm basically wanting to keep things pretty low-key without having to create bullshit courses. So just like subscribe to my channel, buy my books, a little bit from all of you helps keeps this thing going where I don't have to sell you these BS get rich, be a millionaire courses for $2,000 to sustain myself. I like this. I like it organic. All right, so subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you tomorrow.